Hello, everyone. I think we could possibly be live. So I wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. My name's Lisa Levinson, and I am um, actually the host of this program. So today we are featuring our Sustainable Activism webinar, and this is our opportunity through In Defense of Animals to share resources with activists and folks who are trying to help animals. And what we do as part of our Sustainable Activism campaign is provide resources for activists, emotional and spiritual resources, and this is one of them. So without any further ado, it's my pleasure I will introduce you to our speaker, Anne Piotrowski, and I'd like to do that by way of reading a little bit of her bio to you. So I know many of us struggle to stay calm, cool, and collected while engaging in vegan advocacy. But thanks to Anne Piotrowski, who's our guest today, and she founded Conversations with a Friendly Vegan. Help is in sight. Anne helps fellow activists navigate those all too familiar, uncomfortable moments with non-vegan friends, family, and even with strangers. So join us today with Anne, and she's going to help us upgrade our vegan advocacy. So when Anne first went vegan, she was frustrated by countless conversations with non-vegans who responded to her really innocent advocacy with outrage, and I know many of us have experienced this. So she turned these conversations around by developing another approach to talking about veganism. And so her goal is to have really fruitful conversations without any judgment or any agenda. So today, we're very excited to have Anne with us. And just a little bit of positive information about this is now, after developing her strategy, people line up to speak with her at festivals and public events. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to Anne. Hi, Anne.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for participating. It's so exciting. This is something I started officially doing just about a year ago. And I didn't know what it would turn into. So I'm pretty excited that people are interested and that I get to talk about it a little bit. Um, I'd like to, I have a PowerPoint presentation if I could figure out how to share that. And I think you
Yeah.
did show me the other day. So I'm going to go ahead and try to do that. Bear with me. Okay. Can people see that now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can see that.
Okay.
You'll
So,
want to put it onto the full screen, though.
full screen. Here we go. How's that?
Perfect. That's great. I'm
Perfect.
going to
Yay.
pop off, so we'll have an
Okay.
opportunity to see you. But thank you so
Okay,
much.
great.
Looking
Thank you,
forward to it.
Lisa.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Okay, so let me just start by telling you a little bit about what I hope to achieve here today with you guys. One, I just want to introduce a new audience, even though I think I might have a few people out there who I know well. So I want to introduce you guys to Conversations with a Friendly Vegan, tell you a little bit about it and how I came to do what I do. I want to talk a little bit about the importance of self-care in doing this kind of work. I know there are videos out there that specifically address that, but in doing this particular type of advocacy, it's very helpful to do extreme self-care. I want to review the basics of just what it means to have this what it is to do these friendly vegan conversations, and then answer your questions. And next steps, I hope we can connect again and see what the next steps might be. Okay, so this is me. This is me at the table that I did, my first table, which was at a peace fair in the summer of 2017. And I did it kind of on a whim that time. I got an invitation to, do a table at a fair. And I said, you know what? If I'm going to do this advocacy thing, then I just have to find my courage and get out there and do something. So it was really just me, a table. I had brought a few of my cookbooks with me just so people could see that vegan food is wonderful. and a sign that says, "Hello, how about a conversation with a friendly vegan?" So my goal was really to just invite people to a conversation with no judgment, no agenda. I just wanted to have a conversation, so there was no pressure. Um, and I thought I brought a book with me thinking maybe I'll be bored, maybe nobody will want to come up to me, and I was pretty busy the whole day. So we all have kind of our narrative, right? Our vegan story, how we got there. I don't know that everybody participating today is vegan, but a lot of what I'm going to talk about, it doesn't have to pertain particularly to veganism, but for those of you who are vegan, you know what I'm talking about when you say you have your story about how you became vegan and why. And for me, I went vegan in 2012, and it was shortly after something that had nothing to do with animals, which was the Newtown school shooting. And that seems to have, like, how did I get from point A to point B? But what it compelled me to do, like many people, I was kind of like, how could this happen? Why did this happen? There was despair. There was kind of this universal despair going on. And from that despair, I just started to, I'm making a really long story short, but I just started to think that what was most important to me, or one of the things that was most important to me, was compassion and showing compassion. At around that same time, I started to read some stuff about veganism, and it just seemed to be perfect. So one day I just said, I think I'm going to go vegan. I said this to my husband, and he said, okay. So I said, I'm just going to try it for a couple of weeks. And by day 2, I was like, this is it. This is what I'm doing. So I knew I could be prepared for the what to eat. I could look online and find that information. What I was surprised by was the reactions that I got from people. I kind of ranked going vegan very high up on my milestones in life. It's like going to graduate school, getting married, having a baby, going vegan. It's right up there. And so it was pretty important to me. It was something that I didn't have to talk about all the time, but especially at the beginning, it was something that came up pretty frequently. But unlike those, going to graduate school, getting married, having a baby kind of events, it wasn't really met with the same kind of celebratory things. So I didn't expect a celebration, but it was met with a lot of misunderstanding and confusion, which then I felt confused. So it kind of went back and forth. I experienced a lot of defensiveness, and I can't say I wasn't the innocent advocate at that time, putting myself out there and then being kind of beaten up verbally. It wasn't like that. I got defensive as well, and I didn't really know how to articulate what I was experiencing well. So I walked away from a lot of experiences, a lot of family gatherings, a lot of going out to dinners, walking away feeling that kind of not great feeling. I was either keeping my mouth shut and not really saying what I thought, what I believed, or I was getting into some arguments. So what it did was it raised a question for me. I still want to feel connected with people. Hardly at that time, I didn't know anybody who was vegan. And I still wanted to feel close with my family members and my friends. I didn't want this awkwardness to always come up. So I posed the question to myself, how can we talk about veganism or really any important topic where we disagree with compassion and understanding in a way that supports greater connection? So in other words, how can we treat each other even when we disagree on some of our most closely held ideals? How can we still really care about each other and connect and feel close? That was the question that I set out to answer. So what I did was I did a lot of research at that time, but I was also starting to draw from my background. which I'll tell you really quickly. So I do have a degree in psychological counseling, and for a while I worked with people in an inner city hospital, people with severe mental illness diagnoses and also sometimes substance abuse. And then I worked with students, adult students at Rutgers University. I was particularly interested in a form of therapy called rational emotive behavior therapy, or REBT. So I did some postgraduate work in New York and was certified in REBT. And when I stopped working full-time in order to, when I became a mom, I started to run support groups for breastfeeding moms. So I've been advocating for something or someone for a long time, and a lot of the work that I did as a counselor does inform this work, and you'll kind of see that as I go on. Oh, I also obtained a certification in plant-based nutrition, mostly so that I could feed myself well and then feed my family as well. Okay. So I did this because I want to be able to be honest and real about who I am and what I believe. And I want people, and then when I do express what I really believe, I want people to want to talk to me. I don't want them to avoid me. I don't want to come across as argumentative because they are misinterpreting what I'm passionate about as judgment. So I learned how to listen and then speak and then connect with people in a way that helps to set that foundation for that. I want to experience honest and close relationships with people, even when we disagree on something important. I'm genuinely curious about how others think about important issues, even if their opinions are different than my own. Curiosity here is very helpful. If you know, I have natural curiosity. It's probably why I became a counselor. But even if you don't have one, we probably all had it as kids. We're all curious about stuff, and it's kind of if you can reconnect with that curious person inside of you. And when somebody's talking, we don't have a lot of models out there for compassionate disagreement. But if you turn on that curiosity, it helps tremendously, because then you're really just listening to how did that person get to that? How did they come to that conclusion? It doesn't mean you're agreeing with their conclusion, but you're trying to understand how they got there. So another reason that I did this is because the fact is that at this point, vegans only make up 0.5% of the population, which is lower than I imagined when I looked up the statistic, but it is growing, and I'm hopeful. But if I limit my close relationships to like-minded people, I'll be lonely. And my daughter just started a new school, so this may have changed, but in her elementary school, she was the only vegan in her school. So if I teach her to limit her close relationships to only people who are like-minded, then she'll be lonely, and I don't want that for her. This is not intended to be a replacement for any existing form of advocacy. I don't think it's better. I don't think it's worse. I think it's something that can be a supplement to it. I think there's definitely a time and a place to, and I do all the other types of advocacy too, to petition, to protest, to lecture. There's absolutely a place for that. This is another way to be an advocate, but not only just be an official advocate like doing tables and such. It's really a way to live. It's really a way to just engage people, just at family gatherings, at wherever you might be, where something comes up. I have also a while back got impatient about waiting for fairs to come up. So I would just, I don't know if people can see my t-shirt, but I got t-shirts made that say, hello, how about a conversation with a friendly vegan? And so instead of waiting for the next fair or something to come up, I will just go down to the coffee shop or go walk around, and people will come up and talk to me. It never fails. I don't get as many as when I'm standing at a table. when I'm standing at a table, I probably get between like 30 to 50 people. And when I go out and about, it's probably like 3 or 4 people who might come up and start a conversation with me. And it's very clear from the get-go that I'm not judging whatever they say. It's the rules of it are really established right up front. Because people are usually curious about, well, what's your shirt about? And that's usually the first question they ask, and then I go into it a little bit. So my mission is to increase empathy and understanding through deep connection and honest conversation, and to offer support to vegans and outreach to the non-vegan community, just to maximize compassion, understanding, and connection. Just to summarize. So my vision, though, is for the future. What I want from this is that people feel deeply connected to one another and to their own core sense of compassion. And through this connection, they're empowered to act on their values in meaningful ways. And then the goals, which I'll go into a little bit in more detail, is one, I mentioned that practicing extreme self-care. To do that inner work is to build the self-confidence required to allow for vulnerability. So when you have something you believe in so wholeheartedly, it helps to give it that contemplation, to understand it better. Because when you do put yourself out there and you are asking people, hey, just come up and ask me anything, you can say anything, it is a vulnerable place to put yourself. But when you've done that inner work, there's just this core strength that really it's kind of unflappable. So it's kind of a critical first step. It's something that I did very much in the first year or two, deeply, and then I started to just maintain and still pay very close attention. So understanding the issues. I have gotten a lot of different questions, and I'm sure if you're vegan, you have also gotten a lot of different questions. Some really common and asked a million times and answered a million times, and then other questions that are more obscure. And I don't actually feel like I have to be an expert on all the various questions, because I can't be. I don't need to be an expert on everything. But it helps to kind of review some of the basics and try to contemplate them and understand where you stand on those. I have definitely gotten questions where I had no idea how to even think about it, and that's with just authenticity. I just said, you know what? I have never thought about that. And then I would ask the person, well, what do you think about it? Tell me more about what you're thinking about it. And I have also asked people, can we continue this conversation another time? You've given me a lot to think about. I need to go and do some research. I need to think about this some more. But do you mind if can I reconnect with you at another time? And that has happened. So create an inviting space where people can honestly share their own perspectives without fear of judgment. So being present, open, and honest is important. And when I say to be honest, what I'm trying to say is that there have been many moments where I have felt the need to hide what I think, just to kind of keep the peace or not create a fuss. And I just I don't want to do that. I don't feel good when I walk away from an interaction, and I've done that. So I've kind of taught myself to speak my particular truth and be honest in a way that kind of makes it okay. Okay, so the extreme self-care, or the issues that can come up that require the extreme self-care. So becoming vegan, for the most part, even though for me it was born of this kind of tragic thing that happened that caused me to really contemplate things. The actual transitioning into veganism was really full of a lot of joy. I was very happy. But at the same time, there were other things that came up that if you don't understand, if you don't expect those things, it can just be confusing. So grief. So we, in general, as a culture, at least in the states, in the United States at least, we are great at, we have a cultural norm for grieving things like when somebody passes away. When something good happens, there's always losses. When we choose one path, we're always giving up another path. So even like the life events that I mentioned earlier, like getting married or doing something like that, these positive life events uh, that that we want to do can result in feelings of grief. And we're not so terribly good at acknowledging that. In fact, sometimes we may even go in another direction and feel like there's something wrong with us if we feel sad or if we feel a little confused. So there are some things when I chose veganism, there are some things that I gave up. And to be able to acknowledge that and kind of just allow for it it was important for me. To acknowledge those shifting relationship dynamics. If I don't acknowledge it and try to cope with that, then I can't really help. I can't really help to improve my situation. There were changes in just how I fit into the world. So going down to the pizza place that I always go to now required this other conversation, this other level of explaining what I want. And just feeling on the outside of things. So oftentimes, I'm the only vegan there. I'm the only vegan in the room. And feeling kind of separate or on the outside of things can feel okay, but it felt okay the more time that went on. But at first, that can feel a little uncomfortable. Excuse me. Just exhaustion. Like it's exhausting to learn as much as we need to learn and to think about all these things and to deal with the shifting relationship dynamics and the grief and then explaining ourselves. And it can just be exhausting. And vulnerability, which I mentioned. We can even, I never experienced this personally, but I've heard that people have experienced this. It's not just from a non-vegan community that we can experience have some difficult conversations that from vegan peers. It could be you're not vegan enough, or even from your own self. It could be maybe you have a day where there's some backsliding, or there's dwelling on thoughts from the past. Most of us weren't born vegan or raised vegan. We became vegan later. So kind of being down on ourselves for not being vegan enough can cause some problems. So why is it important to address the issues? Taking care of yourself can provide that foundation for maintaining that agenda-free and that judgment-free approach. And ignoring or dismissing these feelings can really result in they just get worse. So and even to the point of getting depressed or anxious. All right, so what do? So to address these issues, I've put this together based on what I've practiced in terms of the rational emotive behavior therapy, looking into that. Also, the connections I've made since becoming vegan with vegan support groups. It is incredibly important to have that support group. So what allows me to go out and speak in a non-vegan context to people who may be challenging me. At that point, really, sincerely, all judgment goes out. I'm really there. I'm engaged. I'm present. I'm with that person, listening mostly, and then sharing. But I have my days where I just really need to vent about stuff that was hard or something that was particularly challenging, and I need to do that with people who are going to understand what I'm talking about. So having that support group has been critical for me. Keeping a journal, because nobody judges what I write in my journal. Nobody reads my journal. So writing whatever you think, whatever you feel, can help to process different kind of feelings. And I guess what I'm trying to say with all of this is just not to discount feelings that might come up. Whatever comes up, it's how you feel, and to just process those is only going to help you move through it and get through it. Ignoring it or telling yourself that you should or shouldn't feel something doesn't help. So part of in the first bullet point where it says unconditional situation acceptance, you don't have to like the situation, but just accepting it, what is, can help you move through it, move on. Okay. Be exquisitely patient with yourself because you deserve that. And then being alert to your stress signals. What is it that I can tell, but when if somebody's confronting me, then I can usually tolerate quite a bit. And then I start to feel stress. I guess like my heart starts racing. I start to feel kind of angry and I know that I might need a moment. I might need a moment to step away from the person or step away from the conversation. So I'm alert to those signals that my body gives me so that I can act on them. And obviously, as a person who was a counselor, I've been both. I have been a counselor and I have been in therapy myself, and I totally support that and believe that in the power of that. And then educating yourself on the issues, which is something I talked about earlier. So moving on from the self-care aspect. So as I mentioned, the self-care is really important, especially at first, and then as a maintenance tool. So it's not the type of thing that you do and then you're done and then you can just go about. Self-care happens every day. Doing things like sitting quietly, meditating, doing yoga, all of these things, whatever your tools are, you can put together your own tools that work for you. Those are things that work for me. That allows you to go out and do the work, which is what I am going to talk about next. So what is required in a friendly vegan conversation? I put vegan in brackets because really you can switch that out for any difficult topic and apply the same skills. I'm going to go through these in detail, so this is just listing them. I won't read you the list, but integrity and flexibility. So integrity means that your premise, like what you believe is based on a logical premise. It's what makes that core so strong. It's what helps you go out there and be vulnerable because you know that you've considered it, you've thought about your reasoning, and it's based on some solid stuff. So for example, I'm vegan based on the premise that it's wrong to hurt animals unnecessarily, and it is unnecessary to consume animals for nutrition, fashion, entertainment, education, etc. It's very simple, it's very plainly put, and it's no matter what other questions come up, that is really at the core of why I'm vegan. So the other questions are become more kind of interesting to entertain, but they don't really touch the reasons that I'm vegan. I've thought about this a lot, and this is a question that I received. Is there anything that would make you not be vegan? And the only thing that would is, and it's already been disproven, so I don't foresee this changing, is if they discovered all of a sudden that it was absolutely necessary for nutritional purposes that human beings could not thrive without consuming some animals. Then you would see me as an advocate for animal welfare. I would go for the best treatment possible. But the reason I'm a vegan advocate is because any credible research out there has shown us that human beings don't need it to thrive. So my actions are based on the principles and my values for the most part, and my principles can remain flexible. So it's always kind of, I'm a human being, and my principles are moving and growing with me. So they can expand and grow to include new information, new experiences. So that openness allows me to grow as a person and also enter conversations with an open mind and just a sincere desire to learn from the person who's standing in front of me. So the curiosity and the presence, so listening well, so we call it attentive listening, means that you are really genuinely curious and you're listening. You're not formulating your response while the other person is talking. We don't have a lot of wonderful models out there for having these kinds of conversations, so we certainly don't see it on the news or anywhere on TV. And if we're lucky, we get a little bit of it at home or with our friends. But usually the way conversations go is that it's more similar to debate. So I have my viewpoint when we disagree on something. I have my viewpoint, you have your viewpoint, and we're each going to kind of talk at each other or wait for our turn to talk and then like say our viewpoint. But we're not necessarily going to really listen and absorb what the other person is saying. We're just going to try to make our point. The whole thing behind this passion of mine is really to change that and to understand that we can disagree and we can still feel connected. So listening well is the first thing I do to somebody is I just ask them what their question is or what they have. I'm listening, and then I can share. So in a sense, a lot of what I draw from, I mentioned that I draw from my background as a counselor, and I do talk about how I'm kind of pulling from the therapeutic relationship these things, and I'm not implying that we should all become counselors and go out there and counsel people, because that would be pretty annoying. But what I am saying is that there are some skills in the counseling relationship that can work very well. If you've ever been to a counselor, or if you are a counselor, you understand that the relationship, not a psychoanalytic counselor so much, but like a cognitive behavioral counselor, one of the important things is building this rapport, building a relationship. There's one significant difference between what I'm doing now and what I did when I was a counselor, and that is only that I wouldn't share my own personal stuff if I were your counselor, except in rare occasions when it was kind of in service of your treatment. Outside of the counseling session, some of the things apply very well, but it's healthier when it's a two-way street, when it's a dialogue. So taking questions seriously. So if you're vegan, I don't know if this ever happened to you, but somebody asks you a question, you kind of know it's a gotcha question. Like they're not necessarily sincerely interested in the answer. They're just trying to catch you in some discrepancy or something. I ignore that and I just treat every question seriously. I just assume they're serious with their question, and that's the way I handle it. And I sometimes reflect the question back to them, because if they hear it coming out of my mouth, it maybe sounds, they might stop and rephrase it or say something else. Listen to understand, not to judge. So this, again, I just said transferring the skills from a therapeutic relationship. It helps to remember this, that if you're seeking to understand, that doesn't mean you're agreeing. So understanding is not the same as agreement. That's very important, because a lot of times we try to resist understanding where the person's coming from because it feels like giving in or giving up our own point, and that's not what it is at all. You're just seeking to understand where that person's coming from. An honest conversation benefits from a non-judgmental environment. And while you can't control the other person judging you, I think that entering a conversation with this mindset helps to set the tone for it. And more often than not, people respond to that. They respond by giving you that same courtesy. So you're more likely to get some honest responses. And also people start to listen to you when it is time for you to share what your perspective is. So understanding priming experiences helps to strengthen a non-judgmental mindset. So what do I mean by priming experiences? Sometimes I think about all the times, I can't remember precise experiences, but I know they happened, and I see how they happen for other people now. But the nature of priming experiences is that you don't really know they're happening when they're happening. But what they are is, I think about all the times that the concept of going vegan and what that meant and why it was important was presented to me over years, that I wasn't ready to hear, or I wasn't in a place to really dig any deeper. So I would hear it, I might acknowledge it, and then I'd dismiss it, and then I'd move on with my life. And then maybe a few months later, something else would happen, and I would do the same thing. And this, I don't know how many times this happened. I can actually recall a couple times where maybe I was watching some footage or reading something where I said, I can't handle that. And I stopped myself from pursuing it any further, and then I went and distracted myself with something else. So I know that that happened to me. So when I'm talking to somebody who's non-vegan and they are wherever they are with it, the fact that they're even coming up and asking me a question tells me that they've probably had some of these priming experiences, and I'm probably one of those now. So I'm presenting them with some information. And in that moment, I'm not going to get frustrated because somebody's not going to flip a switch and go vegan, because I don't know where they are, and they're going to go off and do whatever they're going to do with the information. Some people might do something else. They might go further with it. And for others, they'll forget about it until the next time. So when you think about it, you might think back and remember what were those experiences for you. So remain engaged in the connection and just forget about the outcome is basically it. There's actually a lot of freedom in that, because you really aren't trying to convince anybody of anything when you're involved in this kind of conversation. You're just really connecting with them. You're understanding them. You're trying to see where they're coming from. And then you're inquiring about how they got to that point. And then you're sharing your perspective. And it's a true, just human connection, which can be really amazing. So boundaries, understanding boundaries is important. So most people know what boundaries are, but just so we're all on the same page, I'll tell you that my understanding of boundaries, it's the rules that protect us. So that it can protect you physically. So if you feel like you're in physical danger, you get yourself out of a situation, but also your emotional well-being. So your boundaries can change over time with experience and with different people. So the boundaries I had as a child, so the things that were acceptable and okay when I was a child, those have changed as I've become an adult. And so even with the best of intentions, some conversations can just get really ugly. And it is okay to know your own boundaries and say, that's not working for me anymore. And you can step away from a conversation. Being a friendly vegan doesn't mean you take any abuse. But taking that time, and this may be part of that inner work to understand, where's your boundary? I don't like to be called names. So if name calling comes up, I just deem the conversation is no longer productive. And I have a pretty high tolerance for stuff at this point, but I might tell the person, could you not call me a name? And then if it happens again, then I'm out. Of course, the threat of physical violence is not going to work for me. So that's never happened. It's never been a threat of it. But I've thought about what if it ever happened, and then I'd hightail it out. So the other person also has boundaries to be respected. So, but I don't always know where those are. So some of the language that I use, which I will go over in a few minutes, that I really just ask. So an example of a boundary that I wouldn't cross that is more obvious is, say, for a child, I wouldn't show a child footage or pictures of severe animal cruelty. It's just not appropriate to show a child that. And even a lot of adults don't want to see it. They're not ready. But I may ask an adult, I have this information. Is it okay if I show it to you? And then I'm checking in. I respect the boundaries by checking in to see, where is your boundary? Where is that for you? Abandoning preconceptions. So I don't like it. So people hear one little fact about me. It's a big fact, but so for example, my being vegan, and then they kind of formulate this whole narrative, and they think they know some. They think they know me, and I don't. I don't really want people to do that. I want them to get to know me. So I don't do that to other people. And this actually includes when important conversations come up, I try to abandon those preconceptions, even with people I know very well. That's a little trickier, but it really helps the conversation to stay productive and helps keep it going. Sacrifice comfort for truth. This one took me a while. Uh, part of a big part of why I love doing this is because I feel like it's in a big way truth seeking. So I want to understand where people are coming from. I want to understand people because I want to understand the obstacles to going vegan, and if that's one part of it. So understanding if I can talk to people and they can tell me why they choose not to do it, understanding those obstacles prepares me to be a better advocate. So I want that. But I don't want dishonesty. I don't want people to pretend to believe something they don't or hide things from me, and I don't want to do that. That makes for these stunted relationships that are not real, and I don't want to have that in my life. So I'm okay with, understanding my boundaries, but then that doesn't mean that I'm always feeling comfortable. I'm willing to be uncomfortable. I'm willing to be challenged and feel that kind of like pushback uh, because I'm so invested in wanting to find out some truth and find out where it's going to go. So it's this kind of understanding yourself so well. You understand where your boundaries are, but you kind of push against them, and it's all very personal. Where my boundaries are different than where your boundaries are. Where my boundaries were in 2012 are dramatically different than where they are now. Much more able to tolerate a lot of pushback and a lot of challenges than I ever was before. And I've become more confident, and I've kind of settled into myself as a vegan to the point where I understand that I can handle it. I can handle disagreement. Somebody's opinion, this is just kind of a mantra that I have, that an opinion alone can't hurt me. It can't hurt me at all. In fact, it can help me. It can help me to understand, like I said, the obstacles for that person and probably for a lot of other people. So I acknowledge the discomfort. I allow it, and that's kind of for me the way that I feel like I'm growing as a person is when I kind of allow myself to get kind of uncomfortable. It can be fun. So I am not sure how long I've been talking, but this is just real. I'd like to kind of wrap up on some pretty practical stuff. So kind of just the language of a friendly conversation. So I'll go through this, and then I would love to hear what you have to say. If you have questions, I really just touched the surface of some of this stuff, and I could do a whole other webinar on just the how-tos. But some of the language I use, this is definitely pulled from my days as a counselor, where if there's a touchy subject, something a little difficult to talk about, it's almost tentative. It's like I wonder if, I wonder what would happen if, or have you ever considered looking at it this way, or just asking people, tell me more about that. I need to understand where you're coming from. Tell me. I often repeat back to make sure I understand something. And we'll ask people to try something new. Would you be willing to try going vegan for 2 weeks? Give it a try. I'll give you these recipes and let me know how it goes. And asking, this is a boundary check question. So can I challenge you on that a little? Like if somebody says something and I know it, I know from my research that it's probably not accurate, then I can say, can I challenge you? I'm working with some different information that I'd love to share with you, but I'm checking their boundary. Maybe they don't want to get into that. Maybe they don't want to get into that back and forth. And if they say, no, I'm good, then that's fine. That's fine. Just let it go. And then again, just being able to say, I don't know. If somebody asks me a particular question, I'm like, I don't know. It's either something factual, I don't know the facts to answer your question, or I don't know how I feel about that. There are some topics that are tougher than others. And like I said, I have asked people, do you mind if I do my own digging, do my own research, do my own self contemplation about it, and could we continue this conversation at another time? So I think that is my last slide, except for the resources, which I think you guys are going to be able to access uh, this page or this whole document. And this is not an exhaustive list, but it's where I've gotten plenty of these ideas. And I'd love to hear your questions, your feedback, whatever you have to say. So I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa.
Oh, well, thank you so much. This is really a treat. I appreciate your approach and also just the kindness with which you respond to people, and also just the tools. You actually did share quite a few tools with us, different ways to approach people, to ask them, I wonder if, how to begin these sorts of conversations. Setting boundaries, those are really important tools. Being able to acknowledge how you're doing in the moment and what you're and if you need to continue the conversation another time. So I want to thank you.
Thank you.
And one thing I want to share with everyone that I think is so vitally important is that you are, Anne, you're one person. You're going out there on the streets, you're going out to talk to people at festivals and fairs, and you're one person. I mean, imagine many of us are going to group things and protests and all of these things, but here you are, one individual. And there are many vegans who live in communities where they're the only one. And this is a beautiful way to do advocacy on your own without being alone, because you're interacting with so many people. And I think it's great. I can imagine this whole legion of people with the T-shirts saying,
"Oh, I would love
want
that.
to have a conversation with a friendly vegan."
I would. I will say, Lisa, that at the last table that I did, there was a conflict. There were two tables going on the same day, and my lovely friend and fellow vegan, Suzanne McAllister, who I think you know, ran one of the tables in one place, and then I ran. So I was bragging about being franchised. So I would love to kind of train people a little bit further in this, and if anybody wanted to pursue it, I've got a drawer full of T-shirts.
Oh, that's so great. And I shared your website. Is that the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yes, and the email address would be great, but that's on the website, so that would be great.
Fabulous. So if anyone has any questions, we'd like to take a moment and open it up for questions. And how we do that is, for example, if you are with us, if you're on the phone, you can press *4, and that will unmute you, and you can ask Anne a question. And then the other way would be to turn on your webcam and ask us a question. I'll make sure to unmute you if you've done that, or you can unmute yourself. That would be great. And also, Anne, do you mind
Should I
not
stop
sharing?
sharing?
Yeah, because that way I
That's
think
what I
we'll
thought.
be able to see you, and we can see everyone here. So if anyone has a question for Anne, that would be fabulous. Great. Go ahead and say your name too, so we know.
Okay. My name is Becky, and
Hi, Becky.
I'm so glad to hear this. I have also sat at a table with information, but I didn't have a nice sign like you do, so I really appreciate that. And I would like to do more of that. And I'm wondering, did you try with pamphlets and without pamphlets, handouts? You said cookbooks, or were you mostly focused on the conversation?
I was almost entirely focused on the conversation. So I'm trying to remember that first table that I did. I don't remember if I had handouts or just the sign and me standing there. Then I did develop just a one-page thing that on one side it described kind of what I was all about and about creating this welcoming atmosphere that there was no pressure, no agenda. You could come and ask me anything you want. And then On the reverse side, it just had kind of resources, like my favorite things, like my favorite websites, my favorite blogs, my favorite cookbooks and stuff like that, just so that if somebody wanted to explore a little further, they'd have some information on one page. And that's it. I do get into conversations about animals and stuff, but I'm not associated with a particular animal welfare organization, so I don't have the pamphlets for that. I did also start to put out like coupons for stuff, so I don't know. I'm playing it by ear a lot of the time and figuring out what works for a particular fair or particular population. So, but it's mostly just me going out. When I go out where there's not a table, where it's really just me walking around town or sitting in my coffee shop and talking to whoever's willing to talk to me.
Well, thank you. I would love a T-shirt because I go out and try to start conversations, and that would help. Thanks.
Okay, well, email me.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So I have more of a comment than a question, but I have to show my shirt. So
love it.
I just want to add, I met Anne at her first tabling experience. It was just a year ago. And to me, it was one of those simple, brilliant ideas where any of us who are vegans know what it's like to be on the other end of that hostility that you were talking about, Anne. That was such a surprise to you when you became vegan, and such a surprise to me, that how could anybody be angry at you for doing something so kind? But as we all know, it's very complex, and people become defensive and feel like we're being judgmental, et cetera, et cetera. So when I saw what you were doing, and you know this because I've said it to you, I was just so struck at the simplicity of what Anne was proposing, and that it took away that it almost rendered people, putting down their arms, so to speak, because you were saying, I'm a friendly vegan. So if you're going to approach me, you already know I'm not here to argue. So I was just really struck. And I will also add that Anne came to our vegan spirituality group of Philadelphia, and we had a practice session, which I thought was excellent. Where
I want to do that again.
Yes, we role played a lot of the things that Anne discussed in her PowerPoint presentation, which I thought was excellent. And it really, really helps people to practice, because we can read those things, but when you're in the thick of it with somebody, it can get harder to remain open. And I'll just add one more thing. I think it was you that said this to me, and or somebody, but when they said to be open-minded means you're willing to have your mind changed. And for me, to be willing to have my mind changed is what's key. Not that I'm trying to change theirs. So anyway, I'm grateful, Anne, to you. I've learned so much from you. And yes, we will definitely do another practice session.
I would love that. I would love that. Thank you. You raise a good point, and that is that it's really a skill set. So anything that is based on a skill set can be practiced and learned, and it can be mastered, but it can take time. So Suzanne, having run my table, but Suzanne, you have a background in therapy. You're a therapist as well. So it does draw from that, but we weren't always therapists. We didn't always have these skills. These are skills that we learned, we practiced a lot, and then we mastered. So
that is wonderful.
Personally, I'm excellent at listening, because that's what I do for a living. I'm a psychologist, for those who don't know me. But being able to speak my truth where I'm not sure if it's going to offend somebody is where I need practice. So, and
we all do. And I can't say that I never have a situation where I offend someone. But I think that one of the things that helps is that I myself am not defensive. So that kind of sets that tone. And the
Yeah.
reason I'm not defensive, and this is something that I keep, and one of the other mantras that I kind of keep in my mind, is that a solid idea doesn't need to be defended. It just is. It's unflappable. It's your core, your strength. It doesn't. I don't need to defend it. Nothing anybody says can destroy that. It might give me different ideas. It might make me think about other stuff. But a solid idea that's based on a logical premise that I've considered for this many years now. I don't need to defend it. That somebody else's opinion can't hurt that. So I just allow the opinion and move forward from there. That helps. Yeah.
Such a lovely sentiment. That's really so helpful, that idea to keep in our minds that here we are, we have nothing to defend. We are presenting our core truth, and for each of us, and to know that we're not alone in that. There are many, many of us who share this core truth. So it's really a wonderful gift to share with the world. And I just love your concept also of having an open mind and being willing to change our minds as well, because that's part of it, is we're inviting people to change their minds, and we also it's helpful to do that when we also have an open mind. So
it helps with it helps them to be open to changing their minds too. If I'm sincerely there and I'm sincerely listening, I'm not just entering into a debate where I'm waiting my turn to speak what I believe. When I'm actually listening, I need to be really listening, and that having that open mind does mean that. It does mean that we have to be willing to be moved. So
who's in the picture with you, Lisa?
This is my cat Chico, if anybody's here.
Hi, Chico.
A few words for me right now. So I think he's trying to tell me that the webinar is over. Anyway,
Priscilla has already retired for the night.
Oh, adorable. Absolutely adorable. Well, I want to thank everybody so much. I'm just going to check to see if there's any other lingering questions, maybe in the...
I have one.
Yes, please.
I have one.
Tell us your name.
Hi, this is Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Yeah. From Philadelphia.
Yes, what is your question?
My neighbor.
Yeah. I was in a situation I was going down. Well, I had a situation where I think it was, I had a puppet, right? And I was going down to a zoo protesting. And these are probably, like, as for the animals and entertainment, I think that puppetry is going very far in, replacing them. But I was at a zoo protest, and somebody came up to me with what, I had a puppet that was actually like a small doll, and she said, "That's not a puppet," and or something like that. So I sat down there and it bothered me kind of, but it bothered me a little bit. But afterwards I sort of said to that maybe that's. I was worried about the puppet, but that's not the place to implement it. That's not the place to use it. You were right. The puppets are there to be part of the thing. But however, that's not with somebody that's got that kind of idea or something and doing it. You're in the place where you're actually creating something out of it. You're creating the shows that you're going to see instead of the zoo animals. So I'm just putting that out there.
I like that. So you're suggesting that that's an alternative to using animals as a form of entertainment.
Oh, it's already started.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm all for that.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Chris, for asking your question. And really, thanks to everyone for bringing your voice to this experience together. And it's really nice to be able to speak with other vegans, to have conversation with friendly vegans, even if we're in different areas across the country or even around the world. So it's really a pleasure to have this time together. So I just want to thank you, Anne, for sharing your wisdom with us, and encourage everyone to visit her website, Conversations with a Friendly Vegan. And from there, you can get your T-shirt and join the franchise, which is so nice. And for anyone else who's joined us, if you have issues that come up or concerns that you have, just know that we actually, In Defense of Animals, also runs a support line for animal activists. So if you do want to call and kind of debrief something that's going on, you're welcome to call us. The number there is 800-705-0425. And you can also find us and email us at idausa.org/activist support. And we do have these meetings. We have them every month. So you can sign up through our events page, which is the same website, idausa.org/events. And there you can sign up. We actually have programs every week that we offer where we can gather together online. But this is our Sustainable Activism webinar to really help activists and give them new tools, which is what Anne has done today. So thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank
you.
Lisa.
Yay.
Thank you,
And
Anne.
thanks to everyone for tuning in, and hopefully you'll join us the next time.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Good
Thanks
night,
so
everyone.
much.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.